What happens when your best friend leaves town? And his wife says, "Finally, we're alone." Mark never thought he would find himself in a situation like this. A simple business trip that should have been routine had turned into something unrecognizable. Something charged with a dangerous tension that caught him off guard from the very first moment. Jason, his business partner, had been called away overseas on short notice. An urgent conference, important meetings, things Mark couldn't interfere with. Jason trusted him to keep their projects running smoothly while he was gone, and Mark took that responsibility seriously. But what he hadn't expected was the invitation that came later that evening, the one that changed everything. The knock on the door was soft but deliberate. Mark opened it to find Lena, Jason's wife, standing there. Her hair was loosely pinned up, a few strands escaping to frame her face in a way that made her look both elegant and approachable. Her eyes caught his immediately, dark, shimmering, and unreadable. "Finally, we're alone," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that sent a shiver down Mark's spine. Those words hit him like a jolt. In that moment, all the boundaries he had tried to keep clear blurred into oblivion. Mark's mind screamed for him to step back, to remind himself of who she was, his partner's wife, the very last person he should be tempted by. But the way she looked at him was not innocent. There was something in her gaze, something unspoken and electric, that made his breath catch. Lena stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The house smelled faintly of jasmine and something else, something warm and intoxicating. Mark followed her into the living room, his heart pounding as if it was about to burst from his chest. "I didn't want to bother you while Jason was gone," Lena said softly, sitting on the edge of the couch. "But it's lonely here. Too quiet." Mark nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm here if you need anything." Her eyes flicked to his lips for a fraction of a second, and Mark felt heat rise to his cheeks. They talked, at first about mundane things, work, the house, plans Jason had mentioned. But the conversation quickly became charged with a different energy. Lena's laughter was softer, more intimate. Her hand brushed against his accidentally on the arm, and he didn't pull away. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Mark's chest tightened. He could see the subtle curve of her neck, the way her skin seemed to glow in the dim light. Every instinct in him told him to stop, to leave before crossing a line he couldn't uncross. But he stayed, caught in a strange mix of fear and fascination. "Do you ever wonder," Lena said quietly, "what it would be like if things were different?" Mark's eyes locked on hers. "Different how?" She smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "If Jason wasn't around. If we could just be." The confession was heavy, loaded with danger. Mark felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders like a stone. The words echoed in his mind, stirring something deep inside, a yearning he had never allowed himself to admit. He wanted to say no. He wanted to leave and pretend none of this had happened. But the moment stretched, suspended in time. The line between right and wrong dissolved beneath the heat of their shared silence. Lena moved closer. The scent of her hair enveloped him, familiar and intoxicating. Her hand found his again, firmer this time, her fingers tracing the veins on his wrist. Mark's breath hitched. The conflict inside him roared louder, loyalty to his friend battling the sudden, overwhelming desire that flooded his veins. The world outside ceased to exist. For a moment, nothing else mattered but the way her eyes held his, the softness of her touch, and the promise in her words. "Mark," she whispered, "I've waited for this. For you." His heart pounded so loudly he was sure she could hear it. The name on her lips was like a secret key unlocking something forbidden. They sat there, close but not touching, the tension crackling between them like static electricity. Mark felt the pull, the temptation to reach out and close the distance. But deep inside, a voice warned him this was dangerous. This was a trap. Suddenly, the sound of a car door slamming outside made them both freeze. Mark's pulse quickened. Lena's eyes darkened. "You should go," she said, her voice low but urgent. He nodded, swallowing hard, and stood up. The spell was broken, but the memory of her words lingered like a flame burning in his chest. As he left, Mark's mind was a storm of confusion and desire. He hadn't planned for this. He hadn't wanted it. But but something inside him had shifted. The safe, predictable world he knew had cracked open, and beyond it lay a dangerous new reality, one where temptation, guilt, and forbidden love collided. He knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. Underscore 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 underscore. This is just the beginning. Believe me, it will get much hotter. What happens next will make you forget about peace. In the days that followed, Mark found himself trapped in a whirlwind of thoughts he couldn't escape. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart would jump, hoping it was her, Lena. She seemed to have taken control of his mind without even trying, and yet the more he thought about her, the heavier the weight of guilt grew. He tried to focus on work. He buried himself in spreadsheets, emails, conference calls, anything to drown out the image of Lena's soft smile, the curve of her neck, the way her fingers had grazed his skin so delicately yet left a permanent mark on his soul. But it was impossible. The worst part was how subtle the pull was, how it seemed to sneak into his life in moments when he least expected it. At the office, a quick glance toward the phone made him wonder if she'd text him again. In the quiet of the evening, his mind replayed their conversation over and over, each word more charged than the last. Then the texts began. Lena was careful, never outright. A simple, "How's the project going?" "Here, I miss our talks there." Each message was loaded with double meanings, the digital version of the glances and touches from their meeting. Mark knew it was wrong. He told himself repeatedly that he should stop responding, that he should cut the thread before it unraveled completely. But each reply felt like a lifeline in a sea of loneliness he hadn't realized was swallowing him whole. One afternoon, as Mark was walking back to his car after a long meeting, his phone buzzed again. "Can you come over tonight? I really need to see you." His breath caught. The message was a spark in a dry forest, threatening to ignite a blaze he couldn't control. His rational mind screamed at him to say no. But the loneliness that had been gnawing at him since Jason left was unbearable. The idea of seeing Lena again, even just for a few minutes, felt like the only relief he could imagine. That night, when he arrived at Jason's house, the air was thick with anticipation. Lena opened the door before he could even knock, her eyes shining with something between relief and mischief. "Mark," she breathed, stepping aside to let him in. Inside, the house was quieter than before. The faint scent of jasmine lingered, wrapping around them like a secret. Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he followed her into the living room. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, but the space between them felt charged, electric. Mark kept his hands tightly clasped, fighting the urge to reach for her, to erase the distance. Lena looked at him, her eyes heavy with unspoken feelings. "I felt so alone since Jason left," she admitted, voice trembling. "You're the only one who understands." Mark swallowed hard. He wanted to tell her that he felt the same, that his nights were haunted by thoughts of her. But the words lodged in his throat. Instead, he reached out tentatively and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. The contact was brief, but it sent a shock through both of them. Lena's breath hitched. She moved closer, closing the gap until their knees touched. Her hand found his arm, fingers tracing light circles on his skin. "Mark," she whispered, "why are we doing this?" He shook his head, torn between desire and restraint. "I don't know. But I can't stop." Her lips curved into a sad smile. "Me neither." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, everything else faded: the friendship, the loyalty, the consequences. Then, almost as if pushed by an invisible force, Lena leaned in and pressed her lips to Mark's. The kiss was electric, urgent, desperate, and full of everything they had been holding back. Mark's hands trembled as he pulled her closer, drowning in the rush of forbidden passion. But as quickly as it ignited, the kiss ended. They pulled apart, breaths ragged, eyes wide with shock. "We can't," Mark said, voice hoarse. "This is a mistake." Lena nodded, but her hand stayed on his arm, a silent promise that the line between right and wrong had already been crossed. For days after, Mark was a prisoner of his own mind. He couldn't focus, couldn't sleep. The memory of that kiss haunted him, a mixture of bliss and crushing guilt that threatened to destroy him from within. At work, he avoided Jason's calls, knowing that every conversation was a step closer to the truth. And every time he saw Lena, the unspoken tension between them grew thicker. One evening, Jason called unexpectedly, asking Mark to meet at their office. Mark's heart pounded as he arrived, unsure what awaited him. Jason was tense, eyes sharp, but didn't mention anything directly. Instead, he said, "Everything okay between you and Lena?" Mark's breath caught. He wanted to lie to keep the secret buried. But the question felt like a test, a line drawn in the sand. Yeah, Mark replied, voice steady but his mind screaming. Jason nodded slowly, but the shadow in his eyes told Mark that nothing was as simple as it seemed. That night, Mark's phone lit up again. I can't stop thinking about you. Meet me tomorrow. He stared at the screen, heart torn between hope and fear. We are on the edge. If you think that was intense, wait until you see what comes next. The morning after Lena's message, Mark woke with a pounding heart and restless thoughts swirling in his mind. His body felt as if it was caught in a storm, desire, guilt, hope, and dread all colliding at once. He knew meeting her again was risky beyond measure, yet a part of him was powerless to resist. He tried to justify it. It's just one meeting. Nothing will happen. But the lie felt hollow even to himself. When he arrived at the familiar house that afternoon, the air was thick with unspoken promises. Lena greeted him at the door with that same electric smile, her eyes dark and unreadable. I've waited for you, she said softly, pulling him inside. The moment the door shut behind them, everything changed. The safe walls Mark had built around himself crumbled. The tension that had been simmering between them boiled over, threatening to consume them both. They sat close, too close. Mark could feel the warmth radiating from her body, the intoxicating scent of her skin. Lena's fingers grazed his hand, a subtle invitation that was impossible to ignore. Why do you keep coming back? Mark whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Because I want you, she said simply, eyes locked on his. Because I'm tired of pretending. Her words struck him like a blow. Every fiber of his being screamed that this was forbidden, a betrayal of his friendship with Jason. But the pull between them was magnetic. They talked for hours about their fears, their loneliness, the impossible situation they found themselves in. Lena admitted how much she resented Jason for always putting work first, for leaving her alone with an empty house and a heart full of longing. Mark listened, torn between sympathy and guilt. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay. But he also wanted to run, to escape the dangerous path they were hurtling down. Then, in a moment of reckless courage, Lena reached out and took his face in her hands. Mark, do you feel it too? This connection. His breath hitched. He nodded, unable to deny the truth burning between them. Without thinking, he leaned in, and their lips met again, softer this time, tentative, but filled with a desperate need neither could deny. The kiss deepened, becoming urgent and wild, as if they were trying to make up for all the time lost. But just as quickly as it started, reality slammed back. Mark pulled away, eyes searching hers, full of pain and confusion. We can't, he gasped. This will destroy everything. Lena's smile was sad, but determined. Maybe some things are worth the risk. The hours that followed were a blur of whispered promises and stolen touches. They knew it was dangerous, that each moment was a gamble with fire. Yet they couldn't stop. When Mark left that night, the world felt different, darker, more complicated, but somehow more alive. He was caught in a web of passion and despair, unable to break free. In the days that followed, their encounters became secret rituals. Every meeting was laced with tension, the fear of being caught, the thrill of forbidden love, the agony of betrayal. Mark's internal struggle deepened. He was a prisoner of his own emotions, torn between loyalty to Jason and the undeniable attraction to Lena. Each touch was a battle between desire and guilt, each glance a silent confession. At work, Jason remained oblivious, but Mark sensed a growing distance between them. He was haunted by the fear that the truth would come out, that their secret would shatter everything. One evening, as Mark left the office, he saw Jason waiting outside. The look in Jason's eyes was unreadable, a mixture of suspicion and pain. Mark, Jason said quietly, we need to talk. Mark's heart dropped. The moment he had feared was finally here. Jason's voice was low but steady as he said, we need to talk. The words hung heavy in the cool night air, slicing through the fragile calm Mark had been clinging to all day. Mark's heart pounded violently, a mixture of dread and anticipation tightening his chest like a vice. They walked to a nearby bench under the dim glow of a street lamp, away from the sparse evening crowd. Jason's face was unreadable, but the tension in his jaw betrayed him. Mark wanted to shrink away, to run, to erase every moment of their shared secret from his memory. But he stayed rooted, trapped by guilt and the weight of impending truth. Mark, Jason began slowly, eyes piercing into his like a blade. I don't know what's going on between you and Lena, but I feel it, something's changed. Mark swallowed hard, the dry lump in his throat threatening to choke his words. He struggled for a moment, then forced himself to speak. Jason, I never meant for any of this to happen. Jason's eyes darkened with hurt, but he didn't interrupt. Mark took a shaky breath and continued, when you left, Lena reached out to me. She was lonely and I got caught up in it. It was a mistake, but Jason cut him off sharply. A mistake? You don't get to call this a mistake, Mark. You're my partner. My friend. And you crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. Mark's head bowed, shame burning through him. I know. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Jason looked away for a moment, then back, his voice quiet but full of pain. It's not just about me. It's about trust, loyalty, everything we built together. And now, I don't know if I can believe in any of it. Mark's chest tightened as if someone had squeezed it. I understand. Jason stood abruptly, the anger simmering beneath his calm breaking through. You need to fix this, Mark. Before it destroys everything. And before it destroys her. Mark nodded numbly, feeling the crushing weight of the situation settle over him. As Jason walked away into the night, Mark was left with nothing but his guilt and the terrible certainty that things would never be the same again. Returning home, Mark's mind was a storm of turmoil. The image of Lena's eyes, dark, vulnerable, desperate, haunted him. He knew he had to confront her, to face the truth of what they had done and decide what would come next. He called her, hands trembling. After a long pause, she answered, her voice soft but firm. We need to talk. When Mark arrived, Lena was waiting at the door, her expression unreadable. The warmth between them that had always been a refuge now felt fragile, strained by the reality closing in on them. Inside, the silence stretched between them until Lena finally spoke. Jason knows. Mark's heart stopped. How? She looked away, biting her lip. He saw the messages. He put the pieces together. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in around Mark. What now? Lena's voice cracked with emotion. I don't know. He's devastated. Angry. And I'm terrified. But there's something else, something I haven't told you. Mark's breath hitched, anxiety tightening his throat. What? She took a deep breath, eyes brimming with tears. I think I love you, Mark. And I don't know what that means anymore. The confession hit Mark like a thunderclap. His mind reeled, torn between the rush of passion and the crushing weight of betrayal. The woman he cared for was now not just his temptation, but a source of unbearable conflict. I don't want to hurt anyone, he said, voice breaking. But I can't pretend I don't feel the same. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the truth between them both a fragile, dangerous thread. Suddenly, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway shattered the quiet. Both their heads snapped up, fear and urgency flashing across their faces. Jason's car. They exchanged a look, a silent agreement that everything was on the edge. The moment had come where choices would be made and consequences would be faced. Mark's heart thundered in his chest as Jason stepped inside the house, the tension between all three of them crackling like wildfire ready to ignite. Jason's footsteps echoed down the hallway, heavy and deliberate, each step amplifying the suffocating tension in the room. Mark felt his breath catch, every nerve screaming for him to flee, to disappear before everything imploded. But he stayed frozen, his eyes locked on the door as it slowly creaked open. Jason stood there, rigid, his jaw clenched so tight it seemed as if it might break. His gaze flickered between Mark and Lena, two people who had become the axis on which his world was violently spinning. Explain, Jason said, voice cold and brittle, cracking under the weight of betrayal. Lena swallowed, eyes shining with unshed tears, yet she held her ground. Jason, it's complicated. I never wanted to hurt you, but things happened. Mark and it wasn't planned. Mark stepped forward, trying to find words that could soften the blow, but the knot in his throat tightened instead. Jason, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I care about you, but I was lost. And Lena was there when I needed someone. Jason's face twisted in pain and fury. Lost? So you choose to betray me? To ruin everything we built? I trusted you both. Lena's hands trembled as she reached for Jason, but he recoiled as if burned. Please, Jason? Don't push me away. I don't know who you are anymore, Jason whispered, tears threatening to spill. This isn't just about betrayal. It's about everything falling apart. Mark's heart shattered watching his best friend unravel, but there was no denying the truth of Jason's words. Their secret had shattered the foundation of their lives. Suddenly, Jason's voice hardened. I want you both out of my house. Now. Mark nodded silently, knowing resistance was futile. He grabbed his coat, glanced once more at Lena, her eyes begging for a way out of the chaos they had created, and followed Jason outside. In the cold night air, Mark's mind was a tempest. The weight of guilt, the sting of rejection, and the burning ache of love all clashed inside him. He wanted to scream, to beg, to fix the irreparable, but knew some wounds couldn't be healed overnight. Mark, Lena's voice came softly from the doorway. I don't want this to be the end. He turned, torn, wanting to believe her words but fearing what the future held. This is just the beginning of something we can't stop, he whispered back, the pain raw and palpable. Days turned into weeks, and the fallout from that night rippled through their lives like an unstoppable storm. Jason withdrew from both Mark and Lena, building walls around himself that no one could breach. The business partnership became strained, every meeting a battlefield of icy silences and veiled accusations. Lena avoided Mark, the pain of their secret and its consequences weighing heavily on her. And Mark? He was trapped in a labyrinth of conflicting emotions, love and regret, hope and despair, desire and loyalty. One evening, Mark found himself standing outside Lena's apartment, heart pounding, hands trembling. The need to see her, to hear her voice, was unbearable. He knocked, the sound echoing through the silent hallways until she opened the door. Their eyes met, and in that moment everything fell away, the anger, the pain, the world outside. Only the raw, unfiltered emotion between them remained. Without a word, Lena stepped aside, letting him in. They sat close, the silence speaking volumes until Lena finally broke it. "Mark, what are we doing to ourselves?" He took her hand, fingers entwining. "I don't know. But I can't stop." Her eyes glistened with tears. "It feels like we're falling into something dangerous." "Maybe we are," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes falling is the only way to find out what we're really made of." Their lips met in a kiss that was fierce and tender all at once, a desperate attempt to hold on to whatever shred of hope remained. But beneath the passion lay the truth. The world around them was crumbling, and no matter how tightly they held on, they were both hurtling toward an uncertain, possibly devastating future. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments and fractured realities. Mark and Lena existed in a fragile bubble, suspended between their desperate passion and the wreckage left behind. Every glance, every touch carried the weight of their choices and the looming threat of exposure. Mark's business suffered. His mind was no longer on deals or strategies, but on Lena's smile, on Jason's cold betrayal, on the unbearable tension twisting his gut. The partnership he once cherished was slipping through his fingers like sand, and he couldn't stop it. One evening, after another tense meeting with Jason that ended in icy silence, Mark found himself walking aimlessly through the city. The streets were empty, the night cold and indifferent. He pulled out his phone and stared at Lena's name, hesitating, battling the urge to call and the fear of rejection. Before he could decide, a message popped up. "Meet me at the park. We need to talk." Lena. Mark's heart raced as he made his way there, the night air thick with anticipation and dread. When he arrived, Lena was waiting by the fountain, her silhouette illuminated by the soft glow of the street lamps. She looked fragile, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion and pain. "We can't keep doing this," she said quietly as he approached. "Jason's hurt. You're hurting too. And I don't know if we can survive this." Mark reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I don't care about surviving if it means losing you." Tears welled in her eyes. "It's not just about us anymore. We've torn apart the lives of people we care about." A sudden noise startled them, footsteps approaching rapidly. Jason emerged from the shadows, his expression raw and unreadable. "Enough," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I've tried to understand. I've tried to forgive. But this ends now." Mark felt the ground shift beneath him. "Jason, please. We can fix this." Jason shook his head, stepping closer. "No, the trust is gone. The partnership is over. And as for you two, I don't know if I can forgive, but I can't keep living a lie." Lena sobbed softly, covering her face. Mark's heart broke watching the man he once called a friend crumble before him. Jason took a deep breath, then looked at Mark with a finality that shattered everything. "I'm done." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Mark and Lena standing in the cold night, surrounded by the ruins of what once was. Mark reached for Lena's hand, fingers trembling. "What now?" She looked up, eyes shining with a mixture of sorrow and fierce determination. "Now we face whatever comes, together, or not at all." The choice was theirs, to fight for a love born in betrayal, or to let go and find peace apart. As the first light of dawn broke over the city, Mark and Lena stood side by side, hearts torn but hopeful. The future was uncertain, the path ahead dangerous and fraught with pain. But in that fragile moment, they found a strange kind of freedom, the freedom to choose their own fate. Because sometimes, the most forbidden love is the one that teaches us the most about who we really are.